The shuttle's descent was smooth, almost too smooth, as if the planet below was welcoming them. Maya peered through the reinforced glass, watching the lush landscape of Galbae spread out like a painting. It was all so perfect, so untouched. A tapestry of colors she couldn't even name, deep purples blending with iridescent greens, the occasional flash of electric blue from the glittering rivers that cut through the alien terrain. The planet had been designated humanity's new home, a place to start fresh, to begin again after Earth had become too overcrowded, too exhausted. The colony ship was one of many now headed to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, looking for places where humanity could thrive. And Galbae, with its breathable atmosphere and abundant resources, was the dream come true. A paradise. "Look at that," Daniel, one of the engineers, whispered beside her. "It's just like the brochure." Maya chuckled softly, adjusting her seatbelt. "I'm not sure I trust brochures that don't show the downside." The others around them were silent, entranced by the planet. The crew had all been chosen carefully: scientists, engineers, doctors, and a handful of military personnel to ensure their safety. This was supposed to be a peaceful colonization, a model for the future of humanity. Maya had signed up because she was part of the biological research team. It was her job to understand Galbae's ecosystem, its flora, its fauna. And right now, she couldn't wait to get a closer look, but something deep in her gut felt off. As if the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting for them to land. "Almost there," the pilot said over the intercom. "Prepare for landing." The shuttle shuddered slightly as it touched down on the soil of Galbae. There was a muffled thud as the landing gear made contact, and Maya could feel a vibration beneath her feet, subtle but undeniable. It wasn't like any earthly sensation. It wasn't exactly a tremor, but something more, alive. The hatch opened, and Maya was the first to step out, her boots crunching on the strange, violet-colored ground. It was soft, almost like rubber, and she bent down, brushing her fingers against it. The material was warm, as though the earth was breathing beneath her. She stood up and surveyed the land before her: rolling hills covered in thick, bioluminescent grass, towering trees with wide, spade-like leaves, and flowers that emitted a faint, humming glow. The other colonists slowly filed out behind her, their eyes wide with wonder. Jared, the lead engineer, stretched his arms wide as if trying to absorb the whole scene. "This is it," he said, grinning. "This is paradise." Maya couldn't share his enthusiasm. She took a slow, measured step forward, as though she were testing the soil beneath her. There was something about the air that made her feel uneasy, too heavy, too rich with oxygen, like it was thickening around her lungs. It wasn't suffocating, but it felt wrong. She shook off the sensation, reminding herself that it was just the excitement, the pressure of being the first human to set foot on this world. This was the culmination of years of planning, of hard work. She could feel it in the air, thick with promise. But then came the hum. It started as a low, distant vibration that seemed to roll in from the trees. At first, it was almost inaudible, like the sound of distant thunder, but it grew louder. Maya's eyes snapped to the horizon. The trees, they were moving. The leaves trembled, then shimmered, and the hum grew into something else. Something rhythmic. Something alive. "Do you hear that?" she asked quietly. The colonists fell silent, eyes darting from one to the other. Jared was the first to speak. "What the hell is that sound?" Maya's heart skipped. She felt a shiver run down her spine. The ground beneath her boots seemed to vibrate again, more pronounced now, and her skin prickled with unease. She looked up just in time to see a figure. No, a creature emerge from the forest. It wasn't a mammal. It wasn't even an insect. It was something in between. The creature's body was fluid, transparent, its skin like a jellyfish, glowing faintly in the dim light of the alien sun. It undulated as it moved, its long tentacles trailing behind it, and its eyes, or what Maya assumed were its eyes, were large and dark, like two pools of ink. It floated into view, its body shimmering like liquid glass. Maya froze. It was beautiful, in a way, but it was also terrifying. The creature didn't seem to care about the humans at all. It hovered, silent and curious, observing them with an intelligence far beyond what any Earth creature could possess. "What is that?" someone whispered. Before anyone could respond, the voice came. Low. Calm. Unmistakable. "Welcome to Galbay." The voice wasn't coming from any speaker. It wasn't coming from anywhere obvious. It seemed to come from everywhere at once: the ground, the air, the trees, the very atmosphere itself. The voice was both alien and human, as if it were speaking directly into their minds. "We are the Oster," the voice continued, its tone gentle but firm. "And you are trespassing." A sudden wave of unease washed over Maya. The colonists stiffened, looking at one another nervously. "What does it mean by that?" Daniel asked, his voice a little shaky. Maya didn't have an answer. She stepped forward, instinctively drawn to the creature that now floated just beyond the clearing. Her fingers tingled with an odd sense of connection, like the creature was somehow calling to her, beckoning her forward. It's speaking to us," she said, almost breathless. The creature shifted in the air. A strange, soft hum accompanied its movement, and it seemed to respond to her words. For a brief moment, it hovered motionless, its eyes, or what passed for eyes, locked on her. Then, the voice spoke again, and this time, Maya's blood ran cold. "You are disrupting the balance. The ecosystem is fragile. You must leave." The creature vanished into the trees, fading away as quietly as it had appeared, leaving behind only the hum of the planet, which had now become more insistent. Maya's stomach twisted in knots. Disrupting the balance? What did that mean? She glanced at the others. They were all watching her now, waiting for her to say something, anything. Jared, who had been the most excited about their arrival, was now clearly on edge. "What the hell just happened?" he asked, his voice tight with confusion and fear. Maya opened her mouth to respond but was interrupted by another voice, crackling through their comm system. "Maya, do you read me? This is Colonel Harrison." Maya reached up to her comms, relieved to hear a familiar voice, loud and clear. "Colonel," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Report in. Everything goes smoothly?" She glanced back at the group. "Not exactly. We've encountered, well, something. A creature, and some kind of voice. It's telling us to leave." There was a brief pause on the other end before Harrison spoke again, his tone clipped. "Understood. Stay sharp. I'll send a team down to your location." Maya nodded, though she knew he couldn't see her. She swallowed hard. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. This wasn't what they'd been told about Galbay. The planet had been presented as a dream, a place where humanity could thrive without interference. But now, it seemed as if the planet itself was alive and aware of their presence. Maya looked up at the sky, her heart heavy with the weight of their arrival. They had come to claim this world. But now she wondered if this world would claim them instead. The ground beneath Maya's boots felt even warmer now, as if it was alive, responding to her every step. The hum in the air still lingered, and she could almost feel the planet itself pulsing, like a heartbeat just beneath the surface. She reached up and adjusted her comms, still trying to process the encounter. The Oster, whatever they were, had made it clear they were not welcome here. The colonists were scattered across the landing zone, some still frozen in place, others nervously looking around. Maya could feel the tension in the air. The creatures that had appeared, if they were even creatures, had vanished into the depths of the forest, but the sense of being watched hadn't dissipated. If anything, it had grown stronger, like unseen eyes were tracking their every move. "What do we do now?" Daniel asked, his voice strained. Maya turned to him, unsure of how to respond. She'd been trained for many things, analyzing alien ecosystems, testing soil and air samples, identifying potential threats in a controlled environment, but nothing had prepared her for this. Galbay wasn't a dream, it was something far stranger, something that didn't fit into the neat little boxes humans tried to place the universe into. "We wait for the Colonel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Harrison will figure this out." He has to. But even as she said it, she wasn't sure. Harrison had been quick to dismiss anything that didn't fit with the plan. The Earth government was already invested in the colony's success. There was too much money at stake. Too much pride. Maya couldn't help but feel that any answer that contradicted their expectations would be dismissed. She pulled up her data pad and began running diagnostics on the air quality. Her hands were steady, but her mind was racing. The planet was different. Galbae wasn't just a new world, it was something else entirely. The genetic signature of the atmosphere, the flora, the fauna, it was all interconnected in ways she couldn't understand, but the sensation in her gut told her it was no accident. This place wasn't a paradise, it was an ecosystem on the edge of something. The comms crackled again, cutting through her thoughts. Maya, report. What's the situation? It was Harrison, his voice sharp and clipped. Colonel, we've encountered a— Maya hesitated. An alien species, or something like it. It spoke to us. There was a pause, and then Harrison's voice came through again, tinged with disbelief. A species? What do you mean, spoke? I mean it spoke, she said, frustration creeping into her tone. I heard it in my head. It said we were trespassing and warned us to leave. Another pause. Then, a crackling laugh came through the comms, but it wasn't reassuring. Maya, you're hearing things. We've had no reports of intelligent life on Galbae, and no evidence of any advanced species. I'm sending a team down to your location. You're probably just experiencing atmospheric interference. Her jaw tightened. She knew what Harrison was thinking. He was convinced this was all some kind of mistake, a glitch in the system, maybe even the product of stress or excitement. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that their arrival on this planet had been too easy. Galbae didn't feel like a place that had simply been waiting for humanity to come. It was as though it had been waiting for something else. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and her gaze instinctively flicked to the dense forest surrounding them. There was movement there, something shifting in the shadows, something that wasn't human. I'm not hearing things, Colonel, she said, her voice firm. There's something out there. Understood. Stay put. I'll have a team with you soon. Just try to stay calm. Maya didn't respond. Instead, she turned and started to walk toward the clearing where they had first encountered the creature. The others hesitated, unsure of what to do, but Maya didn't wait. She had to understand what was going on. She had to see for herself. The hum grew louder the farther she went, and the air thickened. The trees, those tall, spade-shaped giants, seemed to bend toward her, their dark leaves trembling in a soft breeze that didn't exist. There were no birds, no insects, just that constant, oppressive hum. She reached out, brushing her fingers against one of the trunks. It was warm. Maya, where are you going? Daniel called after her. She didn't answer immediately. She couldn't. Instead, she took another step, then another, until the hum enveloped her, becoming more than just sound, but a physical presence. And then, without warning, she felt it, the sudden pressure in her head, like something was pushing against her thoughts. It was gentle at first, but it quickly grew stronger, like an invisible hand cupping her skull. Her vision blurred, and she staggered slightly, her breath coming faster as the sensation overwhelmed her. Then, it spoke again. The voice was everywhere, inside her head, inside her bones. You cannot stay. You do not belong here. The words were both a warning and a command, the voice as cold and final as the windless air. Maya froze, her heart pounding. She wanted to turn back, but her feet were rooted to the ground, as if the planet itself had claimed her, keeping her tethered here. Leave now, before you are forced to leave. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. How could she even begin to explain to something like this what they were doing here? They were colonists. They were supposed to be making this world their own. They had a right to be here, but the voice seemed to sense her thoughts, and it answered before she could form another word. You do not have the right. You are parasites, invaders. You will destroy what you do not understand. The pressure on her mind grew unbearable. Her legs buckled beneath her, and she fell to her knees. Her head felt as though it might crack open, and her vision swirled with shifting patterns of light and color, and then, just as suddenly as it had started, the pressure lifted. Maya gasped, her hands clutching the soil beneath her, as though it might keep her from floating away. She could still hear the hum, though it was softer now, as if the planet had released her, letting her breathe again. When she finally looked up, the creature was there, hovering just at the edge of the clearing. Its body shimmered with iridescent colors, its tentacles floating lazily in the air, as though it were considering her, studying her. Its eyes, or its equivalent, were fixed on her, watching her every movement. You cannot stay, the voice repeated. But you will adapt. You will change, just as the others did. The balance will break. Maya blinked, her breath still shallow. What was it trying to say? Who were the others? What balance was it talking about? The creature moved slightly, and for the first time, Maya noticed something behind it, a shape, a shadow, barely visible, but moving. She squinted, trying to focus, and then the realization hit her with the force of a punch to the gut: the creature wasn't alone. There were others, many others, hidden in the shadows of the trees. Watching, she stood slowly, wiping her hands on her suit, trying to keep her mind clear. They couldn't leave. Not yet. Not without answers. The creature, as if sensing her defiance, turned and began to float deeper into the forest, its body disappearing into the foliage. You are running out of time, the voice echoed one last time, fading as the creature vanished. Maya turned, her pulse still racing. She had to warn the others. They had no idea what they were dealing with, but when she looked back toward the landing zone, she found herself staring at a growing line of figures dressed in the dark uniforms of the military team, their weapons raised, their faces hard with resolve. They had arrived. The colonists were no longer alone, and neither was the planet. The military team moved in tight formation, their footsteps heavy on the alien ground. Maya felt a pang of unease as the figures in dark tactical suits approached, their weapons raised and ready. The colonists, standing in the landing zone, instinctively took a step back, their faces a mixture of confusion and fear. It wasn't just the appearance of the soldiers that unnerved Maya, it was the certainty in their movement, the cold precision. They were on a mission, and it wasn't one they could afford to question. Colonel Harrison led the team, his expression set in that familiar, calculated grimness. When his eyes found Maya, they softened just a fraction, but the tension was still there, palpable in the air between them. Maya, he called, his voice sharp. We need to talk. Maya turned and started to walk toward him, her legs still shaky from the encounter with the creature and the overwhelming pressure of the voice. She didn't say anything at first, just watched as the soldiers spread out, securing the area with methodical precision. There was no room for hesitation, no room for doubt. The presence of these men, their guns, their training, it all felt like a declaration. Their plan was already in motion, and nothing, not even an alien warning, would change it. When she reached Harrison, he didn't waste time with pleasantries. I want a full report, he said, his voice colder than she'd ever heard it. Now. Maya hesitated, glancing at the soldiers who were still moving with eerie efficiency. They didn't need to hear what she had to say, not yet. Not until she had the words to explain it all, the pieces to fit together. She took a breath and spoke slowly, carefully. I encountered one of them. One of the Oster. It communicated with me. She didn't mention the pressure in her head, the way it had tried to twist her thoughts into something else. There was no point in telling him about that now. He wouldn't believe it. It told us we're trespassing. It told us to leave. Harrison raised an eyebrow, but his gaze didn't waver. He was waiting for more, and Maya could feel the weight of his expectations pressing on her. What exactly did it say? He asked. She closed her eyes briefly, remembering the voice, the cold certainty in its tone. It said we were parasites. That we're disrupting the balance. That the ecosystem here is fragile and will destroy it. Harrison glanced over his shoulder at the soldiers, who were still on high alert, scanning the trees and the horizon. He nodded slightly, as if mentally dismissing her words. He clearly didn't buy it. Not yet, Maya. I know this is your area of expertise, but there's no way this planet is sending us warnings like that. We've seen no signs of advanced life. We've had no indication of intelligence beyond what we've studied in the biosphere. Then what do you call that? She shot back, gesturing to the shimmering trees around them. What about what we saw? The Oster, those creatures, they're more than just an anomaly. They're part of the planet's genetic system. Harrison didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a step closer to her, lowering his voice so only she could hear. I know what you're thinking, Maya. I know how you're wired. But we're not here to analyze things into the ground. This is a colonization mission. We're not backing down. Maya stared at him, her jaw clenched. There was no room for compromise in his words, no space for the uncertainty she felt. Harrison had made up his mind long before they'd even landed. He had a directive from Earth: the resources here were too valuable, the potential too great. They would force this planet to bend to humanity's will, no matter the cost. And if that meant overriding everything she'd worked for, everything she'd hoped for, so be it. She opened her mouth to argue again, but a sharp crackling sound from the trees interrupted her. The soldiers froze in place, their hands instinctively tightening around their weapons. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the planet, louder now, as though it was growing more insistent. Maya's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just the wind. It wasn't some animal approaching. It was something else. Before anyone could react, the first of the Oster emerged from the shadows. It wasn't the same creature as before, but it was unmistakably one of them. Its translucent skin gleamed in the dim light, and its body shimmered like liquid, twisting in the air with each movement. It didn't walk, it floated. And it wasn't alone. Behind it, more figures appeared, drifting silently into the clearing, their long, undulating bodies twisting with graceful, terrifying elegance. There were 6 of them in total now, each one more alien than the last, their eyes black and endless, their movements synchronized like a dance of predators. The soldiers raised their weapons, but Harrison held up a hand, signaling them to stop. Wait, he ordered, his voice low. He turned to Maya, his face unreadable. What the hell are they doing here? Maya swallowed hard, taking a slow step forward, her mind racing. The creatures weren't attacking. Not yet. But the air between them crackled with a tension so thick it was almost visible. The leader of the group, the creature that had first spoken to her, floated a few feet ahead of the others, its enormous eyes fixed on her. Maya's pulse quickened, her breath coming in shallow bursts. She stepped closer, driven by an impulse she couldn't control. The Oster watched her with an intensity that was almost hypnotic, their forms shimmering in and out of focus. Then, the voice came again, you cannot stay. Maya flinched, the voice as clear as if it were inside her own head. It was a command, simple and direct. No room for negotiation, the balance has been disturbed. You must leave, or you will be changed. Harrison took a step forward, his hand hovering over his sidearm, but Maya reached out instinctively, stopping him with a sharp gesture. Her mind was spinning, but she had to understand what was happening. She couldn't just let them dismiss this, couldn't just let them walk away as if this was some insignificant encounter. The Oster weren't hostile, not yet, but they were serious. And there was something in their tone, in the way they moved, that told her the stakes were higher than anyone realized. Changed? She asked, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. What does that mean? What are you talking about? The creature's eyes flicked toward her, its form rippling like water disturbed by a stone. You will adapt, it said, the voice vibrating through her skull, the words resonating deep within her body. The ecosystem will consume you, just as it has consumed the others. You will become part of us, or you will perish. Maya's breath caught in her throat. What others? Who are you talking about? The creature was silent for a long moment. And when it spoke again, the voice was filled with something akin to sorrow. The ones before you. They arrived, just as you did, with promises of life. They took what wasn't theirs. They broke the balance. And now, they have become part of us. Maya's stomach turned. Her mind raced, trying to piece together what the creature was saying. It wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. The Oster had seen colonists before, had seen the same process play out, and they were ready to make sure it didn't happen again. She thought of the data they'd collected, the DNA samples, the soil analysis. Everything suggested this was a thriving, stable world. But something had changed. And now, it seemed as though the planet itself was fighting back. We do not wish to fight you, the voice continued, softer this time. But we will not allow you to consume what is not yours. Maya's hands trembled as she reached for her communicator, but before she could activate it, a sharp voice broke through the stillness. We don't have time for this. It was Harrison. His voice was cold, tight with controlled anger. Take them down, he ordered, his hand reaching for his sidearm. Maya's heart stopped. She turned to him, her mind racing. No. They couldn't just attack. Not yet. Not without understanding what was at stake. Harrison, no, she cried, but it was too late. The order was given, and the soldiers were already moving into position, their weapons aimed. In an instant, the clearing exploded into chaos. The Oster reacted without hesitation. The leader of the group moved with terrifying speed, its form rippling as it darted forward, its tentacles lashing out, a fluid blur of motion. The air seemed to warp around it, and Maya's ears rang with the sharp, electric crackle of the battle that had just begun. She was caught between the two worlds, between the soldiers and the alien creatures. One wanted to destroy, the other to protect. The planet was no longer neutral, it had chosen its side. And Maya was trapped in the middle, uncertain of which side she would stand on. When the dust finally settled, and then, in the midst of the chaos, she heard a sound that chilled her to the bone, the unmistakable snap of something breaking, something irreversible. The sound of the snap echoed through the clearing, sharp and final, like the breaking of a bone. It wasn't the crack of a branch or the sound of another alien creature moving, it was something deeper, something more unsettling. Maya's breath hitched in her throat as her eyes darted around, trying to locate the source of the noise. But nothing made sense, and then, she felt it, the shift in the atmosphere, like a sudden pressure change, like the planet itself had taken a deep breath. The hum in the air, which had been constant since they arrived, now felt like a living pulse, throbbing beneath her feet, in her chest, in her very blood. The Oster moved faster than she could track. Their tentacles lashed out, their bodies blurring with impossible fluidity, their iridescent skin shimmering like liquid light. The first soldier, a young woman with a shock of blonde hair, was the first to fall. Her rifle discharged wildly as she crumpled to the ground, her arm flailing, the air around her warping as the Oster seized her with inhuman speed. Maya's heart skipped. She wanted to shout, to stop them, but the words caught in her throat. The Oster weren't fighting back the way humans fought. They weren't attacking. They were adjusting. The way the soldier's body spasmed and then stilled told Maya everything she needed to know. The Oster weren't just defending themselves, they were adapting the soldier's physiology, altering her. Another soldier fired his weapon, but the shot was deflected by the shimmering air that surrounded the Oster. The plasma blast glanced off the alien's skin and ricocheted into the trees, causing a burst of light that illuminated the clearing in a moment of stark, terrible clarity. For the briefest of moments, Maya saw the full scope of the transformation happening around her. The Oster were taking, assimilating, changing. One by one, soldiers were caught by the creatures, their bodies convulsing, their rifles forgotten in their hands. Stop. Don't. Maya screamed, but the voice was lost in the chaos. She rushed forward, her boots sinking into the soft earth, but she had no plan, no idea how to stop the soldiers from firing or how to prevent the Oster from taking any more lives. Harrison's voice cut through the noise. Fall back. Get to the evac site. Now. His words didn't make sense. Evacuation? Where could they go? What did they think was going to happen if they left? Maya's head swam, the air growing thick with the electricity of the conflict. The soldiers were pulling back, scrambling toward the outskirts of the clearing, leaving their fallen comrades behind. It wasn't just survival instinct, there was something else, something much darker driving them to retreat. Maya's mind raced, but there was no time. There was no way to warn them all. She was too far from the evac site. Too far from anything that could make a difference now. She turned her attention back to the Oster, who had stopped their advance. They were watching the soldiers, each one floating gracefully in place, their eyes glowing with a quiet, terrifying intelligence. Then the voice came again, piercing her thoughts like a blade, "You cannot escape the change." The words weren't spoken aloud, they reverberated inside her skull, felt deep in her gut, as if the planet itself were speaking directly to her. Maya froze. She could feel the truth in those words, the gravity of them. The balance had already been disrupted, and it wasn't just the soldiers who would be changed. It was the entire colony, the entire ecosystem, everyone who dared to stay. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. There was no going back from this. No amount of retreating, no amount of running, would reverse what had already begun. "Colonel," she shouted, pushing through the haze of panic to find him. Harrison was already moving toward the evac zone, his soldiers dragging the wounded along with them. But he turned when he heard her call, his face drawn tight with the tension of battle. "Get back," he ordered, his voice harsh, commanding. "We need to get out of here." Maya shook her head, her mind still reeling. "You can't leave. Not like this. Not without understanding." Harrison's hand was firm on her arm, pulling her away from the clearing. "We don't have time for understanding, Maya. You're not thinking straight. Get to the evac site now." She wrenched herself free, shaking with a mixture of fear and disbelief. But it wasn't the soldiers she was worried about, it was the Oster, and the things they were doing to the planet, to the humans, to the whole colony. They weren't just trying to defend themselves, they were transforming the humans into something else, something integrated into their world. Her eyes flicked to the clearing. The Oster weren't following. They were waiting, suspended in the air like sentinels. But there was something more, a presence, something beyond their bodies, something invisible. The planet was alive. Not in the way Earth was alive, but in a way Maya had never imagined. The hum was louder now, almost deafening, and it felt like it was inside her head, vibrating in her bones. The trees around them seemed to be closing in, as though the ground itself was pulling in closer, tightening like a fist. There was a feeling of inevitability in the air, a certainty that this place, Galbae, was more than just a planet. It was a living organism, one that had been waiting for the colonists to arrive, to disrupt its balance, to bring about this irreversible change. Maya's legs moved on their own, carrying her toward the outer edge of the landing zone, where the soldiers were trying to regroup. There was no plan. No order. Just a deep, gnawing fear that if they didn't leave now, if they didn't leave before it was too late, they would be part of the change. She grabbed Harrison by the arm again, her voice frantic. "Colonel, we have to go now. If we stay, we'll—" "I know, damn it," he snapped, eyes flashing with frustration. "I know you're scared. But we have to make it to the ship. We can't stay here any longer." But Maya wasn't listening anymore. She could feel the ground beneath her feet beginning to shift, and in that moment, she understood. It wasn't just the Oster that they had to worry about. The planet was changing them. And they were running out of time. The soldiers were moving, but they weren't running fast enough. The hum was growing louder, the air thicker. The Oster were watching them, waiting. And something inside Maya snapped, her heart pounded, adrenaline flooding her system. She had to make a choice. She had to make a choice right now, before she could think, before her mind could make any more sense of it. Maya spun on her heel and sprinted back into the clearing, back toward the Oster. She wasn't sure why, she wasn't sure what she thought she could accomplish. But she knew that she couldn't leave without understanding it all. Not after everything. Not after the warning, the soldiers shouted after her, their voices a blur in the distance. But Maya didn't care. She had to find out the truth, no matter what it cost her. No matter what it cost them all, the Oster didn't move when she approached. They were waiting, their eyes glowing faintly in the twilight. There was no fear, no aggression, just a quiet, overwhelming certainty that filled the space between them. The voice came again, "It is too late." But Maya wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain: she had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. The balance had been shattered. The planet was changing, and it had already started with them. And now, in this moment, she was a part of it, too. Maya's heart pounded as she moved closer to the Oster, the pulsing hum of the planet vibrating through her chest. She wasn't sure what she expected, whether they would let her approach, whether they would speak to her again, whether they would even acknowledge her. But there was a certainty in their stillness that terrified her. They weren't waiting for her to make a choice, they were waiting for the planet to make it for her. The leader of the Oster, the one that had first communicated with her, hovered just beyond arm's reach, its body rippling in strange, liquid-like patterns, its eyes black and deep. It was like looking into a bottomless pit, a void that seemed to stretch forever. And for a moment, she wondered if that was how it saw her, too. A speck in the grand, endless dance of the world. The voice inside her head came again, clearer now than ever before: "You cannot fight this." It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a statement. The voice sounded almost regretful, as though it were speaking to her out of a sense of duty, or perhaps compassion. Maya felt the weight of it settle into her chest, a knot of dread growing tighter with each passing second. She could hear the soldiers in the distance now, scrambling, calling out to one another as they retreated further from the clearing. Harrison's voice cracked through the chaos, shouting orders, urging them to make it to the shuttle. But Maya didn't move. She couldn't move, not yet. "You can't leave," the voice in her mind murmured. Maya swallowed hard, her mind spinning as she took another step forward. "Why?" she asked out loud, though she wasn't sure if they could even hear her. The creature's body shimmered again, its form warping like light through water. It was so fluid, so alien, that it almost seemed unreal. A part of Maya still didn't want to believe it, didn't want to believe that this was happening at all. But the creature's gaze was unwavering, and she felt its intelligence, its awareness, in the very air around her, because the change has already begun. Maya's breath caught. "What change?" Her voice came out desperate, urgent, but there was a sense of finality in the creature's presence, as if the truth was unavoidable. As if the process had already started and there was no turning back. "The planet will consume you," the voice said softly. "And in consuming you, it will preserve itself. The balance has been disrupted. There is no choice now." She blinked rapidly, trying to push away the unease that threatened to swallow her. But the truth of its words pressed against her, like a weight on her chest. The idea that the planet itself would consume them, absorb them, twist them into something else was too alien, too terrifying to fully grasp. But it wasn't just about her. It wasn't just about the soldiers. It was about everyone who had come here, everyone who had ever set foot on this world. Their presence, their technology, their hunger for resources had already changed things. And now, the planet was responding. The Oster were only part of it, a manifestation of the planet's will, its defense. "No one is beyond the change," the voice murmured again, and this time Maya could feel its certainty seep into her bones, deep into her marrow. There was no escape from this. There was no running, no fighting it. The planet would transform everything it touched. Maya's mind reeled as the thought took hold, and she glanced behind her at the soldiers, watching them scramble toward the shuttle, but something inside her rebelled at the thought of running, of retreating, of abandoning the situation without understanding it. They couldn't just leave. They couldn't let this happen. Her hand went to her communicator instinctively, her fingers shaking, but before she could even reach it, the Oster leader drifted closer. Its eyes locked onto hers, and Maya felt the weight of its gaze, felt it slide into her consciousness like a second skin. There was no escape now. The Oster weren't just watching her, they were interfacing with her. For a split second, she felt a flicker of something, an image, a feeling that wasn't her own. It was ancient, primal, the echo of millions of years of symbiosis between the Oster and the planet. It was a deep, unyielding connection, something Maya couldn't even begin to comprehend. The planet wasn't a barren, isolated place, it was alive, a single organism, a mind of its own. And the Oster were its protectors, its caretakers. They were a part of it, just as much as the land, the air, the creatures. They were all bound together in a way that humanity had never understood, never even considered. You are part of this now, the voice whispered, no longer a threat, but a simple fact. You are part of the world's blood, part of its heart. There is no distinction between you and the planet. You will adapt or perish. You are already changing. Maya's stomach twisted. She could feel it, something inside her was shifting. She had always thought of herself as separate, a part of humanity, but here, in the face of the Oster and the planet's will, that distinction was meaningless. She wasn't just human anymore. She was part of this planet's ecosystem, whether she liked it or not. Her hand tightened around the communicator, and for a moment, she considered activating it. She considered calling for help, sending out a distress signal, warning the others. But she couldn't. She couldn't shake the feeling that if she did, it would be the final nail in the coffin. If she brought the shuttle down, if she brought more people to this planet, it would only accelerate the process, push the planet further into a state of hostility. The damage had already been done. They had already arrived. They had already broken the balance. The only thing left to do now was to accept it. Before she could make any further decision, Harrison appeared behind her, his breath heavy from running, his face contorted in frustration and fear. Maya. Damn it, we need to leave. His eyes were wild, frantic, scanning the clearing. But his words faltered when he saw the look on her face. You don't understand, she said quietly, her voice shaky. Harrison opened his mouth, but then the air shifted again. There was no warning, no sound. It was as if the world itself held its breath. And then, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. The ground under their feet began to tremble, first lightly, then violently, the shaking increasing with each passing second. The trees around them groaned as if straining against an unseen force. The sky above them darkened in an instant, swirling with dense clouds that churned in unnatural patterns. It was the planet itself. Maya realized the change had begun in earnest. It wasn't just the Oster who were reacting. It was everything. The planet was fighting back, reacting to their presence, to their disruption. The soldiers were shouting in panic, their voices growing muffled as the tremors intensified. Harrison grabbed Maya's arm, trying to pull her away, but she stood frozen, her feet rooted to the ground. She could feel it now, the pulse of the planet, its heartbeat syncing with hers, the rapid rhythm in her chest. It was like an instinct, like some buried memory rising to the surface. She wasn't just here anymore. She was part of this place, part of its living network. And then, without warning, the ground cracked open. A massive rift split the earth beneath them, a jagged scar that sliced through the clearing, throwing debris into the air. A column of light shot up from the rift, blinding and fierce, and Maya felt the full force of the planet's power surge through her. It was too late, the planet had already decided. The change had begun. And there was no escaping it.